Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. New video series, Marvel Monday. I'm going to be focusing on trying to post a video every Monday of some of my favorite Marvel characters. First character up is Spider-Man, probably the most well-known, most popular character, at least my favorite. It's going to be a how-to style video on how I approach drawing them. Stay tuned. Right, so this video is going to be a little different because you're seeing me doing my thumbnails in the background like normal, but figured I'd go into some of my favorite Spider-Man artists. I feel like anyone who's ever read comic books, everyone has their favorites. I have three. John Romita Sr. Grew up reading some of the stuff that he worked on as the local comic book shop I went to. Was an older guy, and he used to sell you one of the new books and then convince you to take one of the old used ones home with you, as he was convinced that they were better than the comics that were coming out now. John Romita Sr. is probably why I kind of have a soft spot for Tobey Maguire, as I believe the 70s cartoon and the Tobey Maguire live-action Spider-Man was based off of his work. The way Tobey Maguire looks, the way the cartoon looked, they're pretty loosely inspired by, or mostly inspired by, how he drew Spider-Man, how he drew Peter Parker, and most of the feats were done by John Romita Sr., like him lifting up the building from top of himself to being in the pipes with the water and lifting that up. Most of those, I believe, were done by him. My second favorite Spider-Man artist is actually John Romita Sr.'s son, John Romita Jr., also known as JR. I think I started reading his second or third run on Spider-Man. It was written by Michael, I'm going to butcher this name, Stokowski. It's the one that introduced Ezelio to the books and things of that nature, but I always feel like people are not a huge fan of his stuff because they just say he gets it done to get it done, but he's always worked on some of my favorite stories. The one that he worked on with Daredevil, he worked on Kick-Ass. His stuff always kind of stands out, even though he always says he doesn't really have a style. I feel like he adjusts what he's doing to the story he's working on, and the book that he's working on, and the characters he's working on. So it always kind of... My last, but definitely not least favorite Spider-Man artist is probably Todd Knopf. For me, he always hits a sweet spot between Saturday morning cartoon and comic books for me. I learned a lot when he was live streaming on Periscope, and then later on when he started to do YouTube and YouTube style tutorials. Some of the books that he made were very helpful, things of that style of nature. He worked on a few different Amazing Spider-Man books, like Amazing Spider-Man and Silk, Spider-Man Meets the President, I think it was Spider-Man Meets Barack Obama, and things of that nature. He worked on a lot of Teen Titans and things of that nature. He's kind of like the guy you call in when you're doing a teenager book, but he always seems to nail the sweet spot between how a character should look, puts his own little spin on it. Like when he draws Spider-Man, he kind of hits a sweet spot between him being too like super scrawny and skinny looking to not too over the top muscular. On to the drawing process itself. Right now I'm just trying to figure out the lenses. I've always felt I never quite get them how I want them to look, so I'll mess around with them a little bit, playing around with they should be bigger or smaller. Right now you'll probably see me try to adjust some of the lines for the suit. I've always found that I have a general idea of how the suit's supposed to look, or the lines are supposed to go, but they always require some adjusting. Sometimes I feel like I can get it right the first or second try. Sometimes it requires two or three tries to get it just right. The suit's always been a little bit tricky for me to get just right, just because of the lines. The posing for Spider-Man's always fun, but the suit itself sometimes gives me a little bit of trouble. So now we're on to drawing the hands themselves. You'll see me make a few adjustments to get these kind of sort of how I like them to be. Sometimes I feel like I get the hands to look exactly how I want to the first or second attempt. Sometimes I had to bust out the lasso tool and make some adjustments to it. Hands are always a little hit and miss for me. Sometimes they look great. Other times they're too big for the forearm, for the body itself. This one wasn't too bad. It was just I don't quite think I had them it wide enough for the pose itself. So now you're just watching me, like I said, figuring out where to place some of the shadows. I've been playing around with tightening up my pencils and adding in where the light source should be before I start actually inking, which is something I'm currently working on. If you have any tips or tricks for that, let me know in the comments below. We'll get on to the inking here in a little bit, which I'll point out a few things I kind of wish I'd done a little differently, but I'm still getting the hang of it. I already kind of know how to do line work, but inking's a new start for me. So right now I've been mostly practicing and working on my inking. The only real difference between inking and line work is more thick to thin lines. Think like where a shoulder meets a tricep. You make it a little bit thicker here and there to make it stand out. Inking includes that, but it also includes spotting blacks, feathering lines, and sometimes not even completing the full lines. So if I draw a shoulder, I might not finish all of it. If I draw a certain line, I might not finish all of it. So I'm just trying to break some of the line weight habits, as well as working on spotting blacks, figuring out where to place them, which has gotten a little bit better just because I've started to do it with the penciling phase. I do think I have to slow down a little bit with the penciling, just to make sure it's a little bit tighter and ready to go when I start to actually do the inking. But spotting the black has been a little bit difficult just because I'm used to doing it with color, but it has sped up the coloring process for me. Just because I found when I would do cell shading and things of that nature, it wasn't dark enough. I didn't have enough contrast between the shadow and the highlighted areas. The black fixes that. I found that adding just that little bit of black in and rendering and feathering lines and hatching, and then when you do the colors, you really only have to focus on maybe enforcing some of the black in certain areas and adding in some of the colors a little bit here and there, like adding maybe a second layer of on multiply just to get a bit more shadows. But the black seems to fix a lot of that. I also found it adds a bit more texture, which is something I've always felt I missed out on with inking and doing line works. I never felt like I had enough texture to the drawings I was actually working on. But hopefully, like I said, the inking's getting a little bit better. If anyone who's watching this has any tips or tricks for digital inking, just let me know. I've tried a few different things, like using it as gray instead of black, but then by the time I turn it back on, I always have too much black, so I've been trying to find a nice balance between the two. But like I said, if someone who's watching this has any tips for it, shoot them down and I'll try to implement them in some of the up-and-coming videos, and I'll see if I can't get a little bit better with it. Like I said, to me, I don't think I'll get to a spot where I'm like a Canon white when it comes to inking, but even a percentage of that would be nice. So now we're on to the last phase of the illustration, which is the coloring process. I left the flatting in. I know it's one of the more boring parts, but I do have a tip for it, which is to create a layer hierarchy. So what that means is, in Spider-Man's case, as you're watching me do the red section of the suit, put down the red first, and then when you create the next layer, put it underneath, and then do the blue. That way, if you color into the red, it won't show up anyway, and it'll save you some time. I know a lot of people like to use that ice cream lasso tool. I'm not really a big fan of it. If you want to use it, go for it. I've actually found the grab and fill tool works better than that. You can just make small selections and it'll select everything in that area and drop the color in for you. It makes it a little bit quicker. I also mostly suggest, I know this is digital and we should be using the digital tools, I also suggest trying to do it by hand. Just because sometimes you'll find little mistakes or little things you didn't notice and then you can go in and fix them. Other times it'll just create like a little bit of a standout point, or you'll miss something, but it'll add on to it. The paint bucket tool with the right settings works really well too, but like I said, layer hierarchy is the best tip that I can give you for flatting. And then just take your time and clean everything up. Alright, so now we're on to the final stage of this, which is the full out coloring and rendering with color. My only real suggestion is to create a folder, put all your flats into it, and then create a new layer over top and clip it to the one below. You can do it the other method that I used to use, which was creating a layer, duplicating the flats, and then setting it as screen or overlay, and then just erasing out the shadows. That works pretty well too, but because I'm inking most of this, I'm trying a slightly different style out, which is dropping in the flats, doing a new layer on top, and then rather setting it to multiply, screen, sometimes overlay, just depending on how it's looking, and then making small adjustments to it. Sometimes I don't need to add the multiply if I've hue shifted enough to make it stand out. For anyone who doesn't know what hue shifting is, it's when you select a color like red and then you move it to the left for the shadow, so you're moving it into purple. If you're looking for highlights, you start to turn it into a more of an orange color. That tends to work a little bit better than just purple with multiply or blue and multiply. That works for some colors. I find sometimes it doesn't quite look as good as I want it to with other colors. So just experiment with it. Don't be afraid to use the airbrush tool to put in some of the highlights and then add in little bits of harder lights where you need them to be. You can always go in and fix it and make small little adjustments and changes to it. Here's a look at next week's video. Let me know who you think it is in the comments below.